Let me put it this way. Retirement planning in Nigeria has generally experienced low levels of penetration, with locals faced with challenges like low salaries and savings, as well as family and social responsibilities. However, pension sector reforms over the last decade have introduced a compulsory contributory pension scheme designed to better prepare Nigerians for retirement. Joining me in the studio to give us some perspectives on retirement planning in Nigeria is Demola Shongole. He's the CEO of Stanbic IBTC Pensions. Thank you so much, Demola, for joining
Yeah,
us.
you're
It's a
welcome.
pleasure to have you on the show.
Thanks.
So, retirement planning has become a big industry given the pension reforms over the last decade. We've seen 2.4 trillion naira in assets built up, and so one gets the sense that we are on the right track. However, there are quite a few angles to the whole issue of retirement planning. But maybe we should start, first of all, by talking about taking account of the pension reforms and the impact it's likely to have on the lives of participants.
To be quite frank, the pension reform, as it's been, let's say, implemented now, is meant to have a significant, I would say, a fundamental impact, right, on the contributors, right? And from inception to date, we are talking about assets under management in excess of 3 trillion, right? And the important thing is the fact that that amount of money that has been accumulated, or that amount of savings, right, accumulated already, is actually meant for Nigerians to be able to retire well, for Nigerians to spend, their retirement after working, in comfort.
Right.
So that's the whole essence of it.
But from your perspective, from where you sit and your business, have you actually seen some participants transit from just being contributors to actually retired people now? And can you just talk to us about the experience so far?
Oh, the experience, why you won't get to know in the public domain is because the experience has been fantastic. What is reported every time is when people are going through hardship, when people are going through pain. What is happening now is that, let's say in our own space, we are paying close to about 30,000 retirees. They've actually transited from active life into retirement. And you won't get to hear them, you won't get to see them, because in the comfort of their homes, right, they get their pension on a monthly basis.
Right.
We pay in excess of about 1.6, 1.7 billion naira on a monthly basis. And they get it seamlessly. By the 19th or 20th or 21st, depending on whether it falls on a weekend,
Right.
their accounts are automatically credited.
Right.
You don't hear it in the public domain because they are receiving in the comfort of their homes.
Right. So clearly, some people at least enjoying the benefits of the reforms. But like I did mention earlier, it really goes beyond just pensions.
Right.
There are other facets to retirement planning. For instance, housing. I think that is one fundamental need that needs to be addressed for people looking to retire. So can you just talk to us about the preparation that people can make in that respect? I know clearly your focus is on pensions, but you're helping people plan for retirement in a broader sense.
Yes, I mean, housing is one of the basic needs, right? And if you check some of the statistics, every Nigerian would like, every average Nigerian would like to have his own house, right? What we are hoping is the fact that as this pension industry, let's say expands and it increases, the important thing is that, let's say a sector like housing should be able to ride, on the asset under management that we've already been able to accumulate. So we are yet to see, securities like asset-backed securities. We are yet to see mortgage-backed securities in the market. Those are instruments that, the pension industry, let's say the PFAs should be able to invest in. But we are yet to see them. REITs, maybe apart from one or two, and the most recent one, let's say UPDC REIT, we are yet to see substantial, REITs in the market. And when it comes to REITs, we can actually do about 5% of our AUM. So which means that based on asset allocation, out of 3 trillion, we should be able to put in place about 150 billion into REITs. So those things are there, and if we're able to develop that, it helps, to provide housing, right, to Nigerians, to retirees, because they should be able to buy it.
Right. I think a lot of people are expecting a lot from the pension fund managers. But you just mentioned, 3 trillion naira in assets. It's a lot of money, and a lot of that money needs to go to develop infrastructure, to address things like housing. Can you talk us through the changes that you're anticipating in terms of how your pension assets are being managed? Because we know that there have been some reforms with respect to you being now able to participate in private equity. A lot of people have been hoping that pension funds will be moved into infrastructure projects. Talk to us about that transition.
Yes, I mean, the transition is bound to happen. Is almost is a natural evolution, right? And market sophistication will have to catch up with what we've done already in the pension industry,
Right.
in terms of being able to put those products in place. If I may remind you, look, we can afford to put. We have an allocation. When you look at the investment guidelines, we can do about 20% of our AUM, right? We can put it in corporate bonds, and under that corporate bonds, we could actually have infrastructure bonds, which means that out of this 3 trillion, we can afford to put, right, about 600 billion naira in infrastructure bond. You know, the irony of it is the fact that we don't have infrastructure bond yet.
Right.
But it's not impossible that some people are already looking at that. Apart from that, we could also do about 150 billion, 5% of our AUM. We can put it in infrastructure fund.
Yeah.
An infrastructure fund that is already, you know, let's say carved out or structured as a private equity. So from the way we are looking at it, those are some of the assets, right? That, you know, when you talk about asset and liability mismatches, if we are able to, you know, move into alternative asset classes, we'll be able to match our assets with our liabilities.
Right.
And at the same time, you know, be able to visibly or in a physical form, be able to intervene in the infrastructural development of the country.
I think everyone is expecting that. But let's come back to the participants, the people that participate in things like the pension programs. There is a sense that poverty is still a big issue in this country, but your experience over the last decade, for instance, what can you tell us about the experience of Stanbic IBTC in terms of the discussion around the growing middle class? Are you seeing, for instance, a lot more people participating in these programs than, say, you saw maybe 3 or 4 years ago?
I would say the growing middle class is there. I mean, using all sorts of indices.
Yeah.
You know, but you know, to the extent that this scheme is actually a mandatory scheme, is a compulsory scheme, covering both the the private sector and the public sector on the side of federal government, is compulsory.
Yeah.
Right. So what can determine, or I mean, some of the factors that we look out for will be the employment rate, right? Not really the poverty rate, is the employment rate. So if we have rising unemployment, as graduates are coming out of the universities and they are not being employed, then you won't see people coming into the scheme because they don't have jobs.
Right.
Right.
But what about the informal sector? I think there has been a clamor to get the informal sector involved in this program as well.
Yes, I mean,
what's the update on that?
Yes, fortunately for us, I mean, we've seen the exposure draft, you know, guidelines that should help us, you know, to extend this whole structure into the informal space.
Yeah.
And maybe before the end of the year, we will have a final version. Because that's where we can see massive inflow into the system.
Right.
Because the informal sector is big, you know, in terms of population.
Exactly.
Right. And you have, you know, sole man businesses here and there. And the idea is that if we extend it to the informal sector, we'll be able to bring more Nigerians into the scheme. As we speak now, we have about 5.3 million Nigerians. And in terms of penetration rate, right, relative to the working population is less than 8%. But with the informal sector, if we extend that, the informal sector, you could have close to about 40, 50 million Nigerians. Right. We are not saying that all of them are well educated, but the important thing is the fact that to the extent that the scheme has already been open to them under a structured arrangement, we will see more of these guys coming in and we can increase the penetration level. And don't forget that the more the number of people we take care of and we bring into this scheme in terms of their futures, you know, their retirement, the better for the country. Because then their future is assured. And they know that when they retire, you know, everybody will retire one day, no matter how active you are. You know that something is out there for you to take care of your life after retirement.